At just 17, I enlisted in the Lancashire Infantry in November 1914, and by June 1915 I found myself landing in the chaos of Gallipoli. A big ship had been run aground there, the River Clyde, and pontoon bridges had been made at the side of her connecting with the shore. We left our transport and got into little steam trawlers, which were out at the Dardanelles as minesweepers, and these took us to the pontoon bridges. Under fire, we rushed to a bivouac rest camp, stayed for 5 days, and then went into the support line trenches. After a week or two, we went on fatigue. We were in a Turkish communication trench. Dug a dead Turk up, a chap without a head and one of our short Lee Enfield rifles. He had equipment on, and we supposed he had been knocked over by a shell and buried in the rubbish. We were throwing the earth out and making the trench deeper when we came across the Turk's head. You got used to digging bodies up, and all this experience got us used to fighting before we were actually in it. By early August, things heated up. On the 6th, there was a heavy bombardment and a big advance on the left of the peninsula. That was Suvla Bay. According to the arrangements, we were to charge on the 7th, 2 hours after the bombardment began. The attack was postponed until 10 o'clock. I shall never forget that morning at Achi Baba. I had my sight then and could watch all that was going on. We were on the ledge of our trench, waiting to spring over and rush at the Turks. Our officer was standing by us looking at the watch on his wrist. 2 minutes to go, he said. Then at 10 o'clock, over, he shouted. That's all I remember of what he said, and over we went. We all cheered, and then we went helter-skelter for the Turks with the bayonet. They were said to be 250 yards away, but it was a lot more than that, and the ground we had to rush over was terrible. Some of our chaps were knocked flat in this way, some fell of exhaustion, and lots were killed or wounded. The best part of our lot were knocked out before we ever got near the Turks. But when we reached the trench, most Turks were dead. Our task was simple enough. We had to go for one particular trench that was straight in front of us. I rushed at the opening and fell into the trench. I was alone. I don't know whether I was the first man in the trench or not, but I do know that there were none of our chaps there. I scrambled to my feet, and I noticed a wounded and unarmed Turkish officer near me. There we were, the Turk looking at me, and me looking at him. I was looking to see which way to go to get to our other chaps, and the Turkish officer motioned down the trench to the left to show me where they went. I did not notice a wire which ran across the top of the parapet. Before I knew what was happening, my rifle got stuck fast in the wire at bayonet standard. That is, where the bayonet fixes onto the muzzle. My rifle was tilted over, and the bayonet stuck in the back of a Turk who was huddled up in the bottom of the trench. The first I saw of him was when my bayonet struck him. I looked to see if he was dead, but he never moved. I don't know whether I killed him or not, but if he wasn't dead, he was a good actor. I'd been about 2 minutes of getting my rifle clear of the wire when I pulled myself together and went on again in the trench. A Turk who was coming from the opposite direction seemed to be mad and made a lunge at me with his bayonet, but it was broken and no good to him. He turned to run away, so I bayoneted him in the back and he fell. I passed the Turk and then I found our chaps. It seemed a good distance from where I got into the trench to where I found them. I know I had to go round 1 or 2 bends. When we got together again, we were ordered to line the trench. I don't know who gave the order, but it wasn't an officer. I was the end man of the line and we were firing hard when a bullet came. And all I knew was that I was lying on the floor of the trench. One of our chaps was bandaging me, then I was left there while they went on firing. I don't know how long I was lying there, but I was terribly thirsty and drank 2 bottles of water that I took from a dead British chap beside me. The Turks came up in the trench and I heard them shouting something like Gara, although it may have been Allah. They ran over me thinking I was dead. I was lying on my side with my hands covering my head, holding the bandages to stop the blood. I knew then that I'd lost my eyes, and felt as if all the bones in my body were broken as the Turks were running over me. After some time had passed, the Turks settled down a bit, and then they began to examine the bodies. Seeing that I was not dead, they propped me up and began searching my pockets. They were talking away, but I couldn't understand them. They took my paybook and photographs and everything I had. I stood up, and then the Turks took me to a communication trench about 10 yards away. 2 more Fusiliers were being led away along with me, and both had been bayoneted. I was taken to a place where there were Turkish doctors. One of them gave me a cup of tea. He could speak English and he asked me how I was. I told him I was pretty bad. I was given a piece of dry bread, but I couldn't eat it because my teeth were closed. It was here that I met a New Zealander, or an Australian, a gunner who had been in the charge. He had no right to be in it, but you could not keep the Anzacs out of the scraps. He said that he and a pal were passing through the place when they saw what was going on. Each of them got hold of a rifle and bayonet and rushed into the charge. The pal was killed, and the other man was taken prisoner. From the doctor's place, I was taken to a dugout, which had some kind of grass in it. The 2 bayoneted chaps had been taken there as well, and I was glad to have their company. I was left in the dugout all night, with the other 2 Fusiliers alongside of me. In the morning, we were put into oxen carts, 4 wounded men in each. They were rough things without springs, and we were slowly dragged over rough tracks so that it was fair torture to us, bumping all the while. We were stopped at a place and changed into another oxen cart. We stopped again and were given a drink out of a bucket. They must have thought we were horses. I suppose they must have been given a mule a drink, and then it struck them that they might give us a turn. After that, I went into a field hospital, and for the first time since I'd been wounded, I had my eyes properly attended to. A Turkish doctor who could speak a little English said, "Eyes," then a word that sounded like yoke. After I'd been attended to, I was put into a field hospital and fed 3 times a day. First of all, we had a ration of bread, which had to last all day, and a drink of tea. About the middle of the day, we were given some soup and called it Bill Poster's paste. It was awful stuff, and the chaps who were badly wounded could not do with it. I could not eat bread or anything else because my jaws were affected and my face was swollen, but I could manage to suck the awful paste through my teeth. It was not until now that I understood what had happened to me. A bullet struck me on the left side of the forehead and gone clean through both eyes, just missing the brain. A wonderful escape from instant death, as our own doctors told me. A packet of 20 on every one of the 5 days were given to us in the hospital there, and those cigarettes were a treat. After 5 days, we had another dose of oxen carts and were jolted in them to the seashore, where we were put into a steamer. They told us in the field hospital that we were bound for Constantinople, and I was rather glad I was going there. When we went on board, we got a loaf of bread and a drink of tea and a drink of water, and that was all we had for the 3 days we were in the ship. She was full, the place where I was put being crowded with Englishmen. Though there was a Turk on a seat above me, I was lying on the floor under it. It was a great relief to get to the end of the voyage and go ashore. I was taken off the boat, and as we went down the gangway, chaps were handing out nice new pieces of bread and cups of tea. I was lucky because I had my cup filled twice. Then we were taken in open carriages drawn by 2 horses. I was carried on a stretcher into a hospital near the quayside, and here I was turned into a sort of Turk, for I was served with a pair of Turkish trousers big enough to fit 6 of us. They tied round the waist and ankles. I had a shirt also given to me, a big gown which was tied round the waist. The Turks dressed my eyes and put me into a bed, and I was glad to get in. I was in this hospital for about 3 weeks, treated by Turkish ladies who were acting as nurses. A lady who was there was an Egyptian princess and could speak English. She asked me my age, parents' names, occupation and address, and said that she would write to my mother to tell her how I was alive. When next day came, I told her that a chap in my regiment had written home for me. She then told me joyful news that I was going to be sent home. There was a German Bible reader in the hospital. We called him Charlie and was like a brother. At the end of the 3 weeks, an order came for all prisoners to go into barracks, and I was taken off in a carriage. This time I looked like a real Turk, for I had a fez, though I had my baggy trousers hidden by my khaki trousers which I'd put over them, the Turkish doctor having told me to do this to keep warm. In these barracks we slept on a long platform on thick matting which was verminous. We were not fed so well, because the Turkish food is not fit for Englishmen, and they only have 2 meals a day. It was the Sultan's birthday while we were in barracks, but they did not give us anything extra on that account. The Turkish Christmas was celebrated in August too, but we never heard anything about it. The American ambassador came and visited us and gave us 40 piastres each, equal to 6 and 8 pence. The ambassador used to come round to see that we were well treated. Through his efforts I got released and was then sent into the American hospital in Constantinople. I was there about a week, after which I was put in charge of 2 American sailors and sent to Bulgaria. We stayed in a place called the Hotel London, which was nothing but an old shack. We were paying for our food and so on, as the ambassador had supplied us with money for our fares and keep, and the 2 sailors looked after me all the time. After a 3 days rest, a train journey of a day took us to another town called Drama, which is in Greece. From there we went to Salonika, where I was handed over first to the American consul and then to the British consul, who passed me on to the military authorities. The British commander-in-chief asked me questions about officers who were prisoners of war, and I told him what I could.